It feels like Misa, and correct me if I'm wrong, in your mind, would be the perfect fit for the Hawks. Kind of center, brings the size, big time scorer, checks all the boxes that the Hawks kind of lack in the organization aside from Bedard. In a draft where there's not a massive gap between one and the rest, or 1 and 2 in the rest, what would it take for the Hawks to get up to 1 to get that pick from the Islanders, where the Islanders would be, because the Islanders know we want Higgins. We don't want to take him at 1 just because he's not worthy of it. Would it take a ton to make that jump 2 spots to get Misa for Chicago?
In this class, it shouldn't cost what it would normally cost to go from 3 to 1, which would be an exorbitant price tag, right? But you would still imagine, because Matthew Schaefer's sitting right there too, right? And so the Islanders could just quite easily take the best player in the draft, which is probably Matthew Schaefer, and just be happy to do that. So for San Jose, I'm sure they're hoping a team like Chicago wants to jump up, or a team like Utah wants to jump up and do that and take Michael Misa and then leave them Schaefer, which is a perfect fit for their organization. But for Chicago, I think it would probably cost you either a lot of draft capital, maybe that's costing you number 25 plus an early second plus a prospect. Probably gets it done. I'm not saying a high-end prospect, but you're for sure probably losing that 25th overall pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the Hawks are that set on getting, if it's Michael Misa being their guy, we've just been talking for 30 minutes before you joined the show about wanting Kyle Davidson to be aggressive. Go out and do it. If you have conviction to do that, go out and do it. Wanted to ask you and Chris Peters collaborated on a mock draft recently where you were tasked with picking for the Blackhawks, and you went with Porter Martone. What went into that decision for you in that scenario? Is it more what's on the board, or is it more, do you feel like he is probably best fit for what Chicago needs?
Yeah, with Misa off the board, I'm strongly convinced that Porter Martone should be the pick for them. Now, whether or not that ends up being the case, we'll have to wait and see. And I know there has been a lot of buzz that it could be Anton Frundell. I also polled 10 executives and scouts from around the league, and one of the questions I asked them was, who's the top forward? And nobody said Anton Frundell. And I know that there are some teams, or at least putting the buzz out there, that maybe they have him as their number one forward on the list. But for me, for Martone, it's the size, right? He's not a traditional power forward. Like, he's not going to run guys through the end wall all the time, but he has some of that in him. He dropped the mitts a few times this year. He can be a real force to be reckoned with if you can get that spark to be lit consistently. But his playmaking ability off the wing is through the roof. Excellent handles, great puck protection, can get to the dirty areas, will get to the dirty areas and score goals that way too. Has a heavy release, but it's the combination of skills in that big frame that I can just envision. You package him up with Connor Bedard, and now role reversal where you've got the playmaking winger and the shoot first center. It works sometimes, right? We've seen it with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner for years and years, right? Nikita Kucherov and Stamkos. We have these examples of it, and when you can get a big body. Martone kind of reminds me a little bit like Todd Bertuzzi, who everybody thought he was going to be this monster power forward just because of how big he was, but he was more of a skill guy. And then he had to kind of develop that later in his career, through the first 6-8 years. It took him a while to find that physicality. And I think Martone, it might take a little bit of time too, but his impact on the score sheet could be massive. And it's just such a unique blend when you have that size skill package.
Well, Martone's a winger, and I think a lot of people would say that still center is something that the Blackhawks want to shore up, and there's a lot of options. If they were to go down the middle and pick one of the players that in the draft class is a traditional center, is it Frondell? Is it Higgins? Is Desnoyers got a case for it? Out of the strict centers, like, who would you go with at 3 for what the Hawks need?
Yeah, it's when you add for what the Hawks need, right? Is that because if I'm taking the best player on my board, I'm taking James Higgins, because he is he has separating speed. He is an actual burner, terrific hands. He only scored 10 or 11 goals this year, but his shot is actually good. Like I said, he deferred a little bit early on in the season, and he was snake bitten a little bit too, but I think he has a quality release, type of guy who can score 25 in the league, maybe 30 one day. he's the IQ is where I think he needs to ratchet up a little bit, again, above average, but not elite. When you look at a guy like Desnoyers, I do think he has a good mind. I think two-way, he has that two-way ability as well. He has a little bit more size at 6'2". Not as dynamic as Hagens. Not as dynamic as a Jake O'Brien either, who's 6'2", but only 175 pounds. Reminds me a bit of Elias Pettersson, a little skinny, really relies on his handles and his playmaking, needs to add that shot, needs to add that strength. When you're talking about Frundell, bigger body, more physically mature already, has played pro hockey, knows how to handle the rigors of that, much more north-south. Dump the puck in, go get it. Not very creative, has a bigger shot. I think the floor for a player like Frundell is probably higher than most of these guys we've talked about. Him and Hagens is probably very similar, but Frundell has the size. But it's the upside that's probably missing with him. And when you're selecting that soon, it's like you do want to go upside. Obviously you want to get a player out of this, but you're gonna get a player out of number 3. It's you want to maximize that. And I'll mention one more name, and it's Roger McQueen. And I think if he played the full season, he would have been a perfect fit because he has the massive size, right? He has good skills. And it would have fit a whole lot of holes for them. It's like, boom, now we've got Roger McQueen as our second line behind Bedard, adding that meat. And if for some reason you wanted to move Bedard to the wing, well, now you've got a big giant number 1 center too that you can play with. But the injury, the inconsistency, a lot of question marks. Caden Lindstrom last year, teams are a little hesitant. I think we watched McQueen slip a bit on draft day.
Who in your mind is the most ready in this draft to jump to the NHL? Who's going to play maybe next year?
I had this hot take like a few months ago where I said nobody. I didn't feel like anybody in this class was actually ready to step straight into the NHL. And I've changed my position on that a little bit. I think Michael Misa is as close as it's going to get in this group, which is one of the reasons why, the mindset of him and his team there was almost assuredly he was going to move from Saginaw to the NCAA next year. Now the mindset is like, I'm going to make the NHL. As a draft +1. And so then whoever drafts him, if he doesn't quite make it, then it's like, okay, you want to go to school? Let's pick you a good school here. And if that's BU or Michigan or wherever. So I do think Nice is probably closest. And then, if Schaefer played more this season, I'd say him, but he's young and didn't play enough. And so it's probably Martone, right? There's a reason that Canada brought him to the World Juniors. There's a reason Canada brought him to the World Championships. He is a big body and he could probably handle himself, but I wouldn't rush any of these kids, really. I would give them time. It's better to marinate a little longer. No one's ever been hurt by being held back 1 year before jumping in with both feet.
I want to look a little bit later in the draft. Blackhawks now have the 25th pick with the Maple Leafs getting eliminated from the playoffs. There's a lot of ways that they could go with it. I wanted to specifically ask about a guy that I've kind of looked at with that second first-round pick that has gotten me excited, that I feel like, no matter where they go with the number 3 pick, I think fits really well, is Malcolm Spence with Erie. What's your take on a guy like him as more of a kind of that power forward two-way guy?
Yeah, I imagine he'll be gone by 25 in all likelihood. There are some teams I could see him being gone by like 14, 15. Honestly, I know there's some teams that are really high on him. Doesn't play an overly creative style. Really, he has some smash mouth to his game, loves to get on the forecheck, is heavy, can shoot, has good speed. I wouldn't say limited offensive upside, but I imagine it's going to be more in that kind of like 40, 50 point zone, but he's going to kill penalties. He's going to play some second power play unit. He's going to be strong at even strength and do some defensive zone draws and bring some physicality and bring some speed to your lineup. A good player. And in this class, probably a worthy pick in the teens. Versus a stronger class, maybe you would have got a player like that at 25. But hey, on draft day, anything can happen. And this year, the variance is going to be insane from team to team, more so than maybe, recent memory, any draft we've had, is that teams are going to value players completely different. We always hear from GMs like, we couldn't believe he was there. We got our guy. This year, they're really going to mean it because they might have somebody 8 and they're going to get him 25 or something like that because it is going to be incredible variance.
Who else might be there at 25 that you that could be a fit?
Oh gosh, like I said, the variance is so crazy that it's really hard to know, but there's going to be a lot of options. Like a kid like Cole Reshney, who had a tremendous back half of the season, really strong U18s. He could still slip into that zone too, right? Like a slick kind of playmaking winger. Another slick playmaking winger is, Ben Kindle put up like, I think 99 points in the West. There's a world that he could be there, but more realistically, maybe like a big body like Shane Van Saggy, playing at Michigan State there. He's like a power forward, and he has enough skill that he can project, but he's probably going to be a third line type, but he's going to be one of these like heavy, hits hard, skates hard, shoots hard type of player that you're like pretty confident you're going to get a lot of NHL games out of. Colin Potter, arguably the best skater in the class, great wheels, not the biggest player. I'm really curious. I'll be in Buffalo there in a couple weeks for the combine to see exactly where he stacks up. If he's closer to 5'11" or if he's closer to 5'9", that's going to impact his status kind of thing. Braden Coots, another really speed-driven, pacey center out of Seattle in the Western Hockey League. I could see him being around there. Bill Zonin out of the Quebec League, good handles, skates hard, hits hard. Vaclav Nestrasil out of the USHL. He's a big, big boy. Sometimes can just leave your jaw on the floor with his handles and his shot. And then other times just kind of be a ghost, which is why he's going to be around in that 20 to 35 zone. But the upside, very, very high. So loads of forward options there. On the blue line, I'm not sure if Chicago's interested in going blue line on that one, but a kid like Blake Fiddler, 6'4", plays on the right side. He has good, pretty big stopping potential. Sasha Boumediene playing at BU next to Tom Wielander this past year, youngest player in NCAA hockey, really smooth skater, great four-way mobility, not a ton of pure offensive upside despite the numbers he put up at the U18s. So yeah, lots and lots of options in that zone. But again, no slam dunks, I wouldn't say.
And we got to get your thoughts on Jeff Blashill. I saw you had some thoughts on Twitter about him, new Blackhawks head coach. We're all very familiar after talking about him for a week about what he did in Detroit. What are your thoughts on what he could bring to the Hawks?
I just, like I shared there on Twitter, is that I like organizations that give a guy their second head coaching spot. Blashill had, 6 or 7 years in Detroit. There were some bad teams. He didn't do a whole bunch with them, but they were some bad teams. Now, then to go off and be an assistant coach with John Cooper in Tampa Bay, that's a great program they've got there. John Cooper, obviously a well-respected coach. And now you get your second chance. And for a lot of these guys, when they get that second chance, it's like, if I don't do well this time, I'm probably not getting a third. So you've learned from your mistakes the first time around. You're hungry because you've been off the bench for a little bit as the main guy, and now you have this opportunity. And it's like, if it goes well, and I can do some things for 3, 4, 5 years here, I definitely have another job at the other end of this. If it doesn't, back to the assistant coaching bench or out of the game sort of thing. So you're motivated. You're not stuck in your ways like some of these long-term retread coaches that have had 5, 6, 7 opportunities, knowing that their name brand carries with them another job at the end of it, regardless of how they do. So I like it. I like it a lot. I would have been a fan of Jay Woodcroft, another guy getting a second chance. But I do like it for Jeff Blashill. And just talking to some people in the industry is that he's a respected guy and that, he's put in the work and he's deserving of this second chance. And I think it'll do well for him.